So, as I said, my name is Robina Samuddin and I work for the Older People's Commissioner for Wales. I'm one of her senior caseworkers and scrutiny officers in her protection and scrutiny board. What I'm going to talk to you about today is ageism and human rights. So, today, but it's going to be brief, okay, and it's going to offer an avenue where you can find more information and training in this area of work. To start with, when we talk about ageism, it's something that we've probably come across. However, what exactly do we mean when we say ageism? Ageism is the stereotyping of and prejudice against people because of their real or perceived age. But does this definition encompass the impact of ageism? And that's what I want to talk about today. I feel we should explore this a little bit more, but before I talk about it a little bit more, I want you to have a look at this short film. This is a film that is being released by the Older People's Commissioner for Wales, who has started a campaign against ageism. It was recently, came out, and it's basically everywhere, isn't it? It's on the net and everything for people to look at, so I'll let you watch that first.
Say no to ageism. What is ageism? Ageism is treating people differently because of their age. Ageism undermines older people's self-esteem, self-confidence and quality of life. Ageism makes people feel worthless and excluded from society. Despite what the media and some commentators often say, older people in fact contribute over £1 billion to the Welsh economy every year. With a change in attitudes, older people could contribute even more. How would this kind of stereotyping make you feel? Older people are all different. Why not see older people as colleagues, teachers, mentors or friends? One in 6 older people in Wales, that's nearly 150,000 people, live in poverty, with many more struggling to make ends meet. Many older people often have to choose whether to heat or eat. Many older people cannot afford to retire and have no choice to keep on working. But many older people struggle to keep their jobs or find employment. This means that many organisations are missing out on older people's skills, knowledge and experience. Ageism means older people are often treated like second-class citizens. It doesn't have to be this way. Say no to ageism.
Thanks, Cara. Okay, I don't think there's anything in there that is new. Everything in there is known. But when that occurs, we sort of, I think this is human nature. We've talked about that a lot today. How we know things are going on, we try to do something about it, but we kind of sit back a little bit. So the Commissioner for Older People in Wales has made this one of her campaigns to look at ageism and the impact of ageism, which is really important. In her own words, she said that frailty and dependence are not inevitable as people grow older, yet this is the image that sadly prevails. Further, the right to freedom, equality and dignity does not change with age, but for too many older people, their rights diminish as they grow older. I think in a conference, in a seminar like today, where we are talking about domestic abuse and those difficult issues of coercive control, etc., this kind of presentation brings the balance in again to say, okay, yes, those are issues, crucial issues. However, in line with that, we must also remember that older people are not all that is weak and frail and negative. Examples of these have been offered by Steve and by Joe. So stereotypes is what we're looking at when we talk about or think about ageism. They fail to take into account individual differences, perspectives, their preferences, aspirations. Older people do have aspirations and needs. They homogenize and dehumanize by lumping together under a label which is often unrelated to the individuals concerned. Negative prejudices of age and aging are culturally common in our society today. Old age has become associated with physical and mental decline, and thus it becomes a burden or a perceived burden. The impact of ageism then, it includes loss of roles in life, their voice, their influence, their self-esteem, erosion of health and financial security, experiences of depression, frustration, exclusion, isolation, deprivation, denigration, and humiliation. These are very real. When we look at domestic abuse and violence, we find that it affects over 40,000 older people in their homes every year in Wales. 40,000 older people in their homes every year. And this is one of the crucial aspects, and I'm going to also talk about something later, and I'll link it back to this, so keep this in mind, in their homes. That is the one arena that is the most private arena for people, and is the one arena that is the most difficult to get into if they are not contacting people on the outside. So that's a challenge for us. Here I would argue in some cases then that the impact of ageism and the impact of domestic abuse can be seen one and the same. That's my personal opinion. Where they differ is in the extent and level of visible damage caused to an older person. In these discussions, we must not forget the abuse where often no visible marks can be seen. As discussed by Steve in the beginning about coercive control, this is a problem covered by a casework team that I'm part of. And it's been a very challenging area to work with, where challenges have not related to its reporting, but rather believing those reports and practitioners looking to identify the abuse. I had one particular case, Janet, we'll call her that, really concerned about her grandmother. Janet's brother and partner had moved in with the said grandmother and had been living with them and their children. But now Janet and Janet's own mother, which is the grandmother's daughter, and other relatives are no longer allowed to visit the grandmother. When this was discussed with practitioners, I have to admit that there was a sort of resignation in their voice. And their words were, well, if something is happening, somebody will pick it up because she's got carers going in. But maybe they won't. There was one particular event that Janet described to me about her grandmother, which is when she was admitted into hospital, so in a public arena, as it were. And every time this daughter-in-law, the person living with the grandmother, the partner of her grandson, would visit, she described a physical change in the grandmother. She literally would become really uptight, red in the face. You could like sort of see that her heart is pounding as her blood pressure is rising. And every time that this woman spoke, the grandmother would repeat after her. Anything she said, she would say it after her. And then as this person was leaving, would say, okay then, goodbye and God bless. And she actually waited until the grandmother repeated, goodbye, God bless. And then she left. It was, what Janet was describing to me was coercive control. But what I could not get was to translate to the practitioners is you're not going to get this handed to you on a plate. You need to get in there and speak to those carers who are going in there and ask them to look for the signs, to speak to the grandmother when she's on her own. So this is a really challenging area. The impact of ageism then and the suffering of domestic abuse and violence is not true for all older people, but more than enough are suffering from this. We can't associate frailty and domestic abuse. The two are not synonymous. Nevertheless, where it exists, it does not differentiate between economic backgrounds, ethnicities, faith, no faith, gender, disability. Anyone can be vulnerable. And the older people, their vulnerability only grows further at times of their lives. So how do we tackle this? What do we do about this? The second part of my title was human rights. Another phrase that we all hear about, bandied around. We talk about it, but how do we actually use it in our day-to-day work? So human rights must be implemented through the correct articles. However, the term human rights is bandied about, but how does one apply the articles and under what conditions, and how does the Human Rights Act relate to our roles? What exactly does this mean to those who are in need of protection and those whose duty it is to ensure protection and safety is guaranteed? Human rights, to me, seems like a very arbitrary sort of ideal aspiration, but it's actually meant to be used as part of a tool for our daily work that we carry out. So perhaps one of the first questions to be asked then, are the services we provide adequate enough, safe enough? Are we engaged in our communities so that the vulnerable feel comfortable to approach us? Hence that issue of what's going on in the home, we are on the outside, this gap in between, how are we going to fill it? So human rights then. We've had the UN principles for older persons since 1991, aspirational, independence, participation, care, self-fulfillment and dignity. But the Human Rights Act, which came in 1998, we've got Article 2, 3, 5 and 8, right to life. Steve mentioned right not to be tortured or treated in an inhumane or degrading way, which relates directly to the White Ribbon Campaign. Right to liberty, right to respect for private and family life, home and correspondence. And yet, we're coming to the end of 2015, and the discussion is, how are we going to use them? And we really should be using them, because it actually gives power to us in our jobs, and it also will mean that they're being translated to assist the older people. Now, the intention is that the human rights are meant to be transformative and meant to be preventative in their effects. The human rights, okay, the UN principles for older people are meant to be aspirational, but the human rights is actually a legal standard. They're illegal standards and they are enforceable. They're the minimum level, actually. They're not the highest level. So we must bear that in mind when we do the work. So how we imply, I mean, if I'm talking about it from the Commissioner's office, it's because we're actually doing it. We've started to use the human rights in a way that is called the rights-based approach, which is what? It's basically to challenge cultural norms and how we view and treat older people. It's looking at our approach. A rights-based approach can be used to make explicit use of the human rights instruments, use human rights instruments to guide all work and all phases of our work. It builds capacity amongst rights and duty holders to create the conditions for the enjoyment of rights. That gap, the private space and our role, and here's the gap. So, why am I telling you this? I'm not just telling you this because I say, oh, we're brilliant, we're doing this. No, we've put together in the office a training package that is now going to be delivered. So, in order for you to be aware of your obligations under the Human Rights Act, and it being a minimum legal standard enforcing rights, the Older People's Commissioner for Wales, she's been working towards adopting these rights, as I said. So the training now that I mentioned has been designed and delivered within the offices for the staff there. But now it's going to be offered to practitioners free of charge from January 10, 2016, all across Wales. This is the crux, basically. And today's seminar and every speaker here is not only here to say how, what, and how to do certain things. Every single individual here is also to say, this is how we recommend, because this is how we are doing it, and this is how we can help you to do this as well. So in this scenario of human rights and ageism, the training is available, as I said, all across Wales from January 2016, so if you keep your eyes open on the website, it'll be there. I hope that you feel encouraged to attend the Ageism and Human Rights training that will be made available to you, so that we can sort of work from the same hymn sheet, dare I say. Okay, thank you very much.